Hey there, everyone. It's me, John, from Pastors Unplugged ICT. We're getting ready to let you guys see our interview with TJ Lawson in this episode 4 of our Pastors Unplugged. However, before we begin, I just want to explain to you that this is going to be a 2-part show. The first part's going to be here available on YouTube, where we discuss kind of ministry after vocational ministry with TJ Lawson and what that looks like to be plugged into your local church. And the second part, we get into some discussion about how Christians should respond to their anger, how they should kind of allow their anger vent in a healthy way that's still glorifying to God. So if you want to see second part, that's going to be exclusively on our podcast. So check that out on your Apple device, on your Android device, anywhere you get podcasts. You can search for Pastors Unplugged ICT. The link is also going to be in the description of this video. So enjoy this interview with our good friend TJ Lawson, and we'll see you here next time. Hey everyone, thanks for tuning into this week's episode of Pastors Unplugged ICT, where 2 pastors, this time 3, discuss life and ministry unplugged. In other words, what is life like for pastors between 2 Sundays? I'm John Carmichael, and with me is the man who's strong enough to admit that the word loss is most definitely in the name Las Vegas Raiders. Ladies and gentlemen, Lito Solorio. How are you doing, Lito?
Well, after last week's Raider-Chiefs game, it's been a very sad week. But I will say, most of the Chiefs fans have been very kind to me this week. Nobody has assaulted me with their references of the game until now.
Well, I was hesitant. I was hesitant because truly we have no, foothold to really have much to say.
That's true.
We've had a rough season as Chiefs. So next to me and next to Lito, between us, is TJ Lawson.
Hey.
He's an old kind of friend from Ozark days. Crossed paths a few times. His dad was one of our professors.
Just spilling all the tea.
Mr. Tom Lawson, if you're watching this, it's all his idea, what we talked about. So
That's right.
but TJ, how are you doing?
I'm doing great. It's been I wasn't prepared for it to be quite as cold as it is with the wind today. So I'm kind of still reeling from that, but it's been good.
Could you close the windows, Lito?
Okay, hold on.
Hiding it up.
I don't know what's in the shot. Let's close the window.
Just lean over here, pretend there's a window.
So tell us about yourself, TJ. I mean, we could talk about who you are and what your background is, but you are on Pastors Unplugged for a reason. So let us know.
So I grew up my dad was a Bible college professor, as was my mom actually. So we grew up in kind of in ministry and in the church my whole life. My dad was a church planner up in upstate New York when I was a kid, and so kind of grew up with that, and then was in Kentucky most of my life with them being professors, and so always knew that the church was really important to me. I was 12 years old, and my dad took me to Cane Ridge, and he was like, "This is where you come from. These are your people," because that's that was where the Stone Campbell movement first started, and so it's always been such a big part of my identity, and was always something that I knew that I wanted to do. So I actually was a local church pastor for full time for about 12 years, and was have been involved in ministry in churches really since about 2001, 2002. So almost 20 years of kind of being involved in ministry, either as a part-time capacity or as a key volunteer, and it's just always been a part of my life. It's part of my kids' life. It's part of my wife's life. It's a big part of who we are as people. But I'm not in ministry anymore full time. So I'm actually an insurance agent is what I do full time now. It's actually what pays the bills and makes sure my family can eat and live indoors.
A very good insurance agent, by the way.
Absolutely.
Personal insurance agent for our family. So it's been cool getting to know you through that way. Because, of course, we have the background, but also you've been a great support. And
it's
getting in a car accident and all those things.
I have never had one of my insurance agents actually come to my house to help me change a tire, but TJ has.
That's true.
Even if you were still in ministry and I wasn't in ministry and I was the insurance agent, I probably would attend your church. I just want to put that out there. I don't want to say that you attend my church, but I would attend your church.
That's great. That's great. Well, and I think one of the challenges too is a part of the reason I'm doing it is when it first even came up, I knew that I wanted to make a transition. We knew we really wanted to stay in Wichita and just didn't know what that looked like because we loved the city. We felt like it was a great fit for us. And we didn't feel like God had said, hey, you need to leave. Mm-hmm. And so we didn't know really what to do with that. And so when a guy in my small group said, hey, you should come work with me, my first response was absolutely not. Like, nobody likes talking about insurance. That sounds terrible. But the whole time we talked, it was always a conversation around you get to help people, you get to serve people. And for me, like that's why I got into ministry. Like nobody goes into, I know you have seen those stereotypes of preachers in fancy cars and stuff. It is just, I don't know who those people are, but those people are not pastors in local churches.
I'm still driving a 2004 F-150.
Absolutely.
I love it. And it's got 210,000 miles, and it's insured through my guy, TJ Lawson. But I will tell you, it's one of those fascinating things because you brought that up, and it makes me think, I mean, most insured agents that I know that are a part of the local church, that one statement you made, you help others. And I think that's it. That's the heart of it. My insurance agent out in California was one of our elders. He never, tried to get people in the church. That wasn't his motive of business, but it happened naturally. People came to him because they trusted him. He happened to be an Ozark grad. Okay. Just throwing that out there from the 70s. But he's a great guy, and he's always been in my corner. And I remember switching from Geico to him. Yeah,
and I think that's the thing that's like, universally true of somebody who is a person of faith in general is you want to help, you want to serve, you want to make people's lives better. Even if they don't necessarily agree with you faith-wise, even if they're not necessarily on the same page, ultimately you want to help make their lives better and help them to see kind of who God made them to be. And as weird as it is, I get to do that pretty regularly as an insurance agent.
I have personal experience back in the, let's see, I don't even know what it was. I think it was like end of August. I can't remember. It's been a long time, a while now. I got in a pretty bad accident, got rear-ended at a busy intersection in my hometown, the town I live in currently, where my home is. And the first person I called was TJ. I didn't actually call the police because somebody else called the police. But I'll tell you what, you ministered to me that day.
Well, good.
You put me beside calm waters. And
well, it is like at the end of the day, like that's the thing is like it's partially like, and we'll talk about this I'm sure more in a minute, but partially one of the things I miss about ministry is there is something really special about being with people in those moments where things are tough. In particular, getting to call on people pre-surgery, post-surgery. Some of those calls where you're going to see somebody who's on hospice care, and this is toward the end of their lives. I miss that part of things, and the truth is, you get to do that quite a bit in insurance. You're in people's lives often when things are difficult.
And I was clueless during that accident, so it was nice to talk to somebody that knew what they were talking about and the next steps I should take. So cool. Well, what about you, Lito? What's going on in your life? What's happening now? It's just for everybody, all of our listeners. We are recording this early, but we're going to release this the week of Thanksgiving. Yeah. And so, if we talk about things that are current, it might actually be a couple weeks ago. So or just yesterday.
We got two things I'm super excited about. We have a really cool service project that's happening Wednesday night. When this airs, it'll have happened already. We have about 31 people that we're going to minister and feed them a Thanksgiving meal across the street from our church. We wanted to minister to the apartment complex and been reaching out to them. And we even got a gift basket for the manager to love on her and encourage her. And anytime that we could show people that, hey, we're a church that's not just in our building, but we're a part of the community, I think matters. So I'm thrilled about that. On a more goofy note, Ghostbusters comes out this week. Okay. And on a scale of 1 to 10 of my excitement, it's about a 12. Okay. Because as a child, Ghostbusters was the very first film I ever saw in theaters. But I was like 2 and was running down the hall, so I don't remember that. But I remember growing up with Ghostbusters, and the real Ghostbusters cartoon was my jam. I was the kid that like all I wanted for my birthday was the backpack and the I forget the name of the ghost catcher.
The thing they throw out on the ground and step
on. And it had like as a kid, the toy itself, it had some mechanism in it, like a air-powered thing. Yeah. When you stepped on it, it pushed air and it would open, and the joy of that toy.
It was so cool.
And even this last year, I actually had the old Ghostbusters tower, and I'm like, why do I still have this? Maybe if I hang on to it for another year, I might make a couple extra bucks, but I actually sold it finally for a good price and was able to get 2 signed autographed Star Wars action figures from R2-D2 Kenny Baker and then C-3PO Anthony Daniels. So now I know I'm just switching one love of my Ghostbusters toys to Star Wars, but I'd rather have that. But I am excited for this film. I've heard good reviews from it, and I'm seeing it with tomorrow night, which would be Thursday, which would be yesterday when you watch this.
Awesome.
So I don't know if anybody else is a Ghostbusters fan. Were you ever?
I liked Ghostbusters. It was never like a favorite.
Yeah.
But that toy, that floor catcher, whatever that thing's called, was one of those toys that other kids had that I was always super jealous of. That and like the really big Castle Grayskulls were the two things as a kid that I was like,
yes,
we had a knockoff Castle Grayskull that I think came from Big Lots as a kid.
Big Lots, and maybe, or if you got it from the Christian bookstore, it was like, Mount Carmel, like they're gonna have a pillar of fire on the top.
So what was it called? Like a manor gray.
Yeah, it was like off-white manor or something like that.
Off-white manor. The off-white.
That's right. It's something like that. But yeah, it was that toy in particular was a really cool one because it would pop open. If I remember right, it had a little thing that would pop out of it too.
I think it was even glow in the dark on the top shelf thing.
Target released that.
Did they really?
Yeah, it's like
I'm
close
not
to
allowed to
$100
walk down the toy aisle anymore.
It's like close to $100.
Really?
Yeah.
That much?
It's huge. It's like 79 or 89 or something like that.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's probably got all kinds of cool Bluetoothy things.
Yeah, and I think it comes with some
something.
action figures with it.
Okay.
Yeah, so it looked pretty cool. And I was actually thinking, I was like, I wish my kids don't care about that stuff anymore. Like I have a 15-year-old and a 7-year-old boy, and he, because of his 15-year-old brother, is all into video games, and like he's kind of
he jumped
over the action figure thing. Like he doesn't really have any interest in that. It's kind of sad.
My eldest son's also video games. The second child, boy, still likes the toys. So
hold on to those toys, man.
We've been Legos and then straight to video games has really been our kids' thing. It's with Legos and then video games.
Yeah,
so
Legos are still part of the household.
We still
get them Legos.
Well,
they love Legos.
This last September, my brother texted my wife, said, "What does Lito want?" And for years, all I wanted was like a nice bonsai tree, a real live bonsai tree in my office. And I've probably gone through 4 when I was a youth pastor, and they would die. I could never keep them. And they were probably some cheap knockoff from some local store. But my wife says, "Oh, Lito really wants the bonsai Lego set." And it's like an adult Lego set. And I bought it. My brother bought it, I should say. I got it for my birthday. And it's sitting in my house. I've yet to put together because I just think if I do it at home, my kids are going to lose pieces because they're real tiny. They're more made for adults to put together. And I've thought about bringing it to the office and just putting it together on my desk. But then everybody's going to walk by my office and go, "What does Lito do? Play with Legos at the office?"
It's a sermon illustration. I have to do this.
You might have mentioned, was this a Mr. Miyagi inspiration?
It probably is a little Mr. Miyagi inspiration. I loved the Karate Kid.
I wanted a bonsai tree when I was younger too, and it had to do with Karate Kid. Like,
really?
I thought maybe somehow I would be able to channel my inner
karate.
Yeah, karate without taking any lessons. Just by trimming
the Lego. Yeah. It's also got cherry blossoms on it too. Like you could change colors if you don't want the green. Anyways, it's Legos are for all ages.
That's right.
I mean, speaking of toys and gifts and all that, this is going to be released technically on Black Friday. People are going to be out shopping. People are going to be, but Black Friday comes after what holiday?
Thanksgiving.
Absolutely. I mean, it's easy to forget Thanksgiving because Black Friday is.
We've already moved past people. We're already listening to Christmas music at our house.
We've already thanked. Yeah. Let's now go spend.
But Thanksgiving has happened by the time you're listening to this, but it doesn't mean it's not still in our hearts.
That's right.
It's in my heart right now because it hasn't approached when we're actually recording this. But I want to talk about Thanksgiving a little bit, and and usually we have a little game, a little trivia, a little something fun to entertain our viewers, listeners. I want to do something I call Thanksgiving meal fantasy draft.
Okay.
All right. So just like any fantasy draft, there's a pool. Imagine just a pool of Thanksgiving food items. It doesn't matter what course it is.
Wait, is the food in the pool? I'm confused. Is it underwater?
So you have a list of Thanksgiving items, and this could be pretty broad. But we'll try to stay somewhat traditional.
Okay.
There'll be some leniency. But what I want to do is we're going to do a snake-style draft where you're going to draft your number one, what you have to have at Thanksgiving.
Okay.
But we can't repeat it.
Not based on tradition or because everybody thinks you must have this, but because you want this at your Thanksgiving.
This is the most important to me.
More important to you. Okay. And once it's been picked, nobody else can pick it.
That's why
I'm going to write it down, keep track.
Yeah, I'm with you. Go.
We're going to do top 3 snake draft. We're going to let our guest TJ go first, followed by Lito. Then I'll pick.
Okay.
And then we'll come back and reverse it. Okay.
All right.
So number 1 pick for meal items doesn't matter. It doesn't have to be in order of any course. Like you can choose dessert first if you want.
Okay.
But number 1 for TJ, what would be your first pick?
The absolute single most important thing on the Thanksgiving table for me, I am from Kentucky, is where I grew up, is oyster dressing. So oyster stuffing.
Interesting.
That is a fundamental part of Thanksgiving identity.
Did you say oyster stuffing?
Oyster stuffing. So it's stuffing. It's got fresh oysters in it. It's got a kind of a funky seafood taste.
Never had it.
I love it. No one in my family likes it. So when I make it for myself, it's just me that eats it. But it is a fundamental.
Have you ever
part.
done a fantasy draft before?
I have.
Okay. Him and I probably would never pick that. So.
Well,
third pick.
What I didn't want to know is I didn't want it to be dequalified because somebody else got stuffing, and so I was afraid. I was trying to.
Should we take stuffing off the table?
My number one would have been stuffing.
So that's why I went first.
Okay,
that's why I went first.
I think taking stuffing off. We have to take stuffing off the
Even if
table.
it's a specific type. Okay, got it.
Yes.
Okay.
And then Lito, you got next.
Potatoes, mashed potatoes,
That's a good
potatoes.
Mashed potatoes.
But
whites.
I will clarify, like you saying oysters. I grew up. Our grandmother used to make us mashed potatoes with corn, and we'd mix it.
Okay.
I have to when I have Thanksgiving. I don't need turkey or anything else.
Yeah.
But if I don't have mashed potatoes and corn, it's not Thanksgiving. Those two things have to be together.
Okay.
I have my one son, one of my boys does it too now, where he's a dad, I need mashed potatoes like your grandma used to make, and it has corn. We add it afterwards, and you mix it together. My brother still does this today. He'll text me photos of him eating mashed potatoes and corn, and we sometimes throw gravy on it, but it doesn't need gravy. You can just add gravy. I like gravy, and I usually do add it, but if I had mashed potatoes and corn, I'd be happy.
So when you serve it on your table, is the corn in a separate bowl?
It is in a separate bowl,
so then you mix
and you put it on the plate.
Okay.
So you make your own
And then you
famous KFC famous bowl.
That's right.
That's right.
When that came out, I was pretty thrilled. I'm like, there's mashed potatoes and corn in this? I gotta have it.
That's awesome.
All right, so for my first pick, I'm gonna have to go because I think it'll be taken off, maybe not, but I'm gonna choose homemade rolls.
Oh, that's a good one.
Some
Good
fresh
one.
yeast rolls. So, and then for my second pick, because I'm a gracious guy, I'm not gonna make this. Potatoes I think are off the table. Dressing's off the table. But if I pick a specific kind of pie, you guys can pick another kind of pie.
Okay.
All right. So I'm gonna pick. And my wife's gonna kill me for this, but cherry pie.
She
She
likes
hates cherry pie.
Oh.
But
Really?
my mom makes this cherry
Okay.
pie that has to be at Thanksgiving. Sadly, I don't think it's going to be this year
Yeah.
because we've already talked about the menu this year. But,
Oh, no.
but
Are you driving over
homemade,
there for Thanksgiving?
I am going over there
All right.
Thanksgiving. Yeah.
Okay.
So I'm gonna say cherry pie is my second pick.
I feel like when
And I
that
just
comes
broke
out,
my own
like
rule.
I have a vision of like you showing up to Thanksgiving and you like surprise everyone and you come out with that cherry pie and then the music cherry pie starts playing.
That's right.
Cherry pie. You put it.
You got to dance. You got a whole TikTok
dance
thing
with it,
going.
and your
Yeah.
mom just
Best
clapping.
part of waking up.
So when you do
Cherry pie.
when you do cherry pies, is it like got the crumble on it, or is it like the lattice work on it, or
it's like a solid piece of
Okay,
crust,
okay.
a nice homemade thick crust.
That's
my
the way
mom
to do
makes.
it.
It's
That's the
really,
way to
really
do
good.
it.
And she uses like Washington like pitted like those like the more sour cherries.
So it's like
not-
it's like grown up.
They're not. Yeah, it's not the canned goopy jelly type
Okay.
cherry filling. It's really really good, solid pie. So all right, so Lito, we're coming back to you.
I mean,
Your second pick.
I'm going to say this. No one else will choose this because it's not your traditional food for Thanksgiving.
It's your fantasy,
but
man.
it's my fantasy because I'm trying to think. I've been married 15 years. And the first Thanksgiving, we were in Joplin, Missouri. We hosted. We had friends from Ozark come over to our apartment. And I think that may be the only time that Tiffany and I either ordered or prepared a turkey. Ever since then, we do tri-tip. I cook tri-tip on Thanksgiving. I'm not against turkey. I even asked Tiffany, I go, do you want to make a turkey? And she's like, we just don't eat it. And we like tri-tip. So we go with the cow.
Okay.
That's just what we do. Chick-fil-A loves us.
I feel, yeah, go ahead. I'll let you. It's your pick, so you go ahead. I'm gonna.
Tri-tip's a good choice. That's because I'm on the fence on turkey. For me, the next thing is probably I'm gonna go with cranberry relish. So my mom makes this cranberry relish from scratch every year. It's got whole oranges and cranberries, and it has to sit in the fridge for like 3 weeks to kind of mellow out.
Cranberry sauce is off the table.
Yeah, sauce. Yeah, but it is.
You've
my
got to
go-to.
mellow out.
That's right. It's intense if you don't let it get
intense.
like.
Is that how they say it in Kentucky?
It's intense. It's a little too bright. You don't let it hang out.
That's
Yeah.
awesome.
What's funny is like I've had some good homemade cranberry sauces, but like my brother Matt, if he's listening to this or watching this, he is insistent that you cannot have any other cranberry sauce but canned cranberry sauce with the lines from the can.
Yeah.
He wants that. Like he's like, we can't have anything else.
So weird. But I'm okay with canned or even powdered potatoes. Like to me, I'm like.
And I think he actually said that he likes when it kind of melts with the heat of the turkey and the potatoes, and it kind of like fuses in the juices and all that, which that can happen with any cranberry sauce. So, all right, so that's number 2 for you. So now we're snake back number 3 for you.
Oh, so number 3 for me. So the last one for me would probably be, oh man, there's so many choices now that are left on the table. I'm gonna go with lemon meringue pie. I'm gonna go with a lemon meringue pie. My mom makes a homemade lemon meringue pie.
Okay.
It's probably my favorite thing on the pie table.
Yeah.
I'm gonna go with a pie too. Is it my turn? Or
yes, your turn.
Okay,
back to you.
I'm a pie guy, but I'm allergic to a lot of fruits.
Okay.
A lot of people don't know that, or do they? I can't. Yeah. I like pie. Growing up, I had pie, but I developed like a fruit allergy as a teenager. So there's a lot. There's some fruits I can still do, but not most. So for me, it's like the French silk pie. Specifically, like I used to get it at Marie Callender's in California, but Village Inns is also like off the charts.
That is pretty good.
And I have to order it. I usually call them because they get all those pie orders, and I order my own pie and pick it up. Usually Wednesday, but
that's a good pie.
Stuff.
That's
good
a good
choice.
pie.
I'd be happy with those 3 pies on my Thanksgiving: cherry pie, lemon pie, French silk pie.
You got to get a little bit of all of them.
So I have a funny story, but my grandma one Thanksgiving, she made and she's known to make really, really good lemon pies, like lemon meringue pies. And she decided to try to make a bigger version of it. She made it like in a casserole dish.
Okay.
With the crust and and it did not turn out like, I guess the chemistry wasn't there. Yeah. The science wasn't there.
The science.
And though it
pie
tasted
science
amazing.
Or baking science.
Though it tasted amazing, it was really runny.
Yeah.
And but everybody was like really enjoying it still. And my grandma, who is a very reserved, she's a really sweet, reserved woman. She was going around trying to get rid of it. And she was going around the tables and she goes, "Does anybody else want any more of this crap?" And the whole table just busted up because you never hear my grandma say that. But she was so disappointed in how it turned out. She just was like scooping up, "Does anybody else want any more of this crap?"
Yeah.
And man, we roared. It was so
grandma.
great.
I have grandma stories. My grandma was a little bit more, she's from Missouri. She was tough as nails.
Hey, that's where my grandma's from. Actually, she was born in Kansas, I believe, like the Hutchinson area. So, all right. So for my final pick, it's not my grandma's lemon meringue soup. I love you, Grandma. But I agree with you guys that meat, the main course, is kind of relative. Like you don't have to do turkey. I feel like if you're talking about giving thanks to God, it should be things that you really truly are thankful for.
Very
and
true.
Turkey, which is really hard to. I mean, it takes a lot of work to make a turkey good. So I'm actually going to say this is something we have a lot of Thanksgiving with my family, and it's lasagna, because my mom makes an amazing lasagna.
Really?
Yeah.
Because lasagna? Okay.
Yeah, and we actually debated
lasagna?
this year. We didn't want to put it on our mom to do it, so my brother's making a ham. But all of us always agree to like, let's not waste our time and money on a turkey. Let's do something that we really, really want. And so lasagna is something that my mom's lasagna for Thanksgiving. It's very, very non-traditional. I don't even know why I had to do a draft. None of us had to do a draft. We just should have said our top 3.
Well, I mean,
you can't have my mom's lasagna. It's off the board.
Traditional Thanksgiving foods: lasagna, tri-tip, oyster dressing.
Don't get me wrong. If lasagna, tri-tip, and turkey were on the table, I would have a little bit of each. I want to clarify.
I can make a really good turkey, but it's just a lot of work. It's
a lot
like
of work.
40 hours.
And I'm usually
labor
the
just
cook
getting...
when it comes to Thanksgiving.
Me too.
My wife makes amazing mashed potatoes. So it's the only, like, all year long, if we have mashed potatoes in our house, it's usually just like me and the powder and the 2 cups of water. I'm like, boom, it's done. But on Thanksgiving, I tell my wife, we have to have your freshly made mashed potatoes. And they are off the charts. Yeah. And like when the kids are sleeping that night, I'm in the fridge getting the leftovers, potatoes and corn, because I love it that much.
It's a good combo.
One thing about pastors that it's been true about every pastor, we love food.
Yeah.
And so
Jesus did teach us.
Jesus did, yeah. Food is an important.
He's the bread of life.
Important thing. So I do want to move on to kind of our main content today. We've had a lot of fun talking about food, talking about the Raiders.
Thanks.
But I do, we touched a little bit about your transition.
Yeah.
You've been involved in ministry vocationally or part-time or volunteer. I mean, your whole life being raised in a church, or not church, in a family full of ministers and professors. And so, you've recently, how many years have you been out of vocational ministry?
I'm into my third year of being out of vocational ministry. So I'm about 2.5 years is where I'm at.
And explain, what did you do in vocational ministry?
So I was a primary teaching pastor at two smaller congregations, and then was the discipleship pastor at a church, or outreach pastor at a church until I transitioned out. So I've been kind of in a couple different roles.
Okay, cool. So what I want to talk about is like now people know you're in insurance now and do a great job in that. You talk about how you love how you can still help people and be there to, in a different way, minister to people. But even inside of the church, because I know you still are plugged in ministry. How has that translated? How have you tried to be intentional about still being a minister or in ministry? Because I feel like we're all called to be in ministry, regardless if that's your vocation. Mm-hmm. If you are a follower of Jesus, he's called you to minister to others in some way, shape, or form. So how's that looked in your life as an insurance salesman? Yeah. But in the church, like in the actual local church, like how is that?
So the first couple weekends that I was out of ministry, it was the weirdest feeling to not get up and to go to church. I still find myself getting up at like 4:30, 5 o'clock in the morning on Sundays because it's so hard to get out of that habit. I missed it. But one of the things that was really fun was like getting to go visit churches of my friends, getting to go visit other places I just never get to do. I mean, you just never get to go. My buddy Zach, who is now back in Maryland, was preaching at his church, and he was the associate, and I got to go sit and listen to him preach. And you just don't get to do that when you're in a local church. And so that was really fun. But for me, we really wanted to find a place where we could get plugged in, where we could get planted that was relatively close to us. Was one of the challenges of Wichita's a big enough city that if we got involved at a church, that's down in Derby, we're like even where we're at, we're almost as far away from where I live here at Countryside than you are almost anywhere else in Wichita. Yeah. And so it's a challenge for us. And so we really kind of shopped around to try to find a place that we could plug in and kind of invest. Yeah. And it was a weird experience because there was all these anxieties about, we'd found a church that my wife really liked. She liked the preaching. She liked the way that the church was structured. I really appreciated how they handled service. But the gentleman that was preaching the second Sunday we visited, he went for an hour and 10 minutes. And the service was only supposed to be 90 minutes long. Yeah. And so he is still preaching, and it's 10 minutes past when the second service was supposed to start. And I'm sitting there like trying not to have a panic attack. Because I can hear, like behind me, I can hear all the people in the lobby ready to come in. And all I can think about is all of the children's volunteers upstairs with the kids. And like they've got the first class is still here. The second class is trying to come in. You've got switching over of teachers. And I told my wife, I said, babe, I can't do this.
Too much anxiety.
This is too stressful for me. I cannot plug in here. And so ultimately we ended up getting plugged in the church we serve in.
I do want to tell you, I appreciate you sitting through my sermon.
It wasn't Lito. Let's be clear, it's not Lito. No, it was not Lito. But yeah, because I'd emailed you and be like, hey man, I just want to let you know that's a problem.
I've not preached an hour and 10.
And again, like, and the truth is, the guy that was preaching was a great communicator. Sometimes people go a long time because they don't know what they're doing. They're just kind of circling and trying to figure it out. He was doing a great job. It was just a lot of material he was trying to cover. And it was just stressful for me. And so we got plugged in our church ultimately because the Sunday we left after first visiting some friends of ours, Amber and David, had invited us. And my kids, when I got in the car and said, hey, what did you guys learn? They could tell me what they learned. And I was like,
that's huge.
Okay, this may be it. And so we plugged in. I actually serve on the leadership team of the church. I get to preach periodically. But we just show up and help out. We try to be as just an active part of the congregation. And for us, that is as fundamental as going to the gym. It's not even something, it doesn't matter how you feel about it. This is part of who we are as a family, is we serve, we show up, we go, because I think that gathering with God's people is really that important.
Yeah. I think it's easy. I've seen a lot of pastors and former pastors, they may experience burnout, and when they go back into church life and life, because they don't want to disconnect from the local church. But I have seen a disconnect from serving in the church a lot. because they go in and it's maybe it's a healthy thing at first, you know, to kind of step back and just kind of say, hey, I need ministered to.
Yeah.
But sometimes it just gets they just get kind of comfortable in that spot where I'll attend, but I'm really going to just withdraw myself from any kind of leadership, any kind of investment in any ministry. And I'm glad that you've chosen to help and be a part of investing in ministry, and I think that's really cool and really healthy that you've done that. One thing I've always been curious about is like as lay people, lay people is a fancy term to say not a paid staff member of a church, but we say that because we want to differentiate between, you know, you're still a minister in the church,
right?
Regardless of what you're paid or not, you're a lay minister. How do we? And I'm rambling a little bit, but how do we communicate to those who feel like I'm not trained enough? I don't have the Bible college education. I didn't preach in a church. What do we have to say to them about like how can they still invest in a church and see it as, you know, it's going to the gym. It's not just a workout for them, but we're going to help other people work out.
Yeah, and I think that's part of the challenge is really getting to the point where you're committing to church. You know, in part, like you don't want to stay at a church that's unhealthy. You don't want to stay at a church where things where it's difficult for your family to connect, where it's difficult where there's some situations that are going on that may not be the healthiest. You know, there are unhealthy churches out here, and we were real careful about what churches we visited and where we got plugged in. And so I think there's a little bit of due diligence there. Is you want to know that you're a part of a healthy congregation. But the truth is, like, there's no church is perfect. And as somebody who's sat on both sides of the table now, it's really clear you can see that. There's no church that's perfect. There's no minister that's perfect. You know, I can even listen to people that I know, you know, including my dad, who's in full-time ministry back in Kentucky now, and hear him preach, and I'm like, oh, that wasn't his best. But I also recognize the context of the fact that isn't why I go to church. I don't particularly need to like the music. I don't particularly need to do this. I'm here because I want to be a part of what God's people are doing, being gathered here. I want to know other people. And so I think that's really the first shift that has to take place. And for me, I think the real fundamental piece for a lot of folks is being a Christian feels like it's part of who we are and not fundamental to our identity. Yeah. And for me, it's when people talk about like, oh, your faith is, you know, oh, that's your faith. It is so a part of who I am. Again, when I was 12, you know, we went to Cane Ridge where Campbell first began to preach, and where the movement that, you know, ultimately the Christian churches were kind of birthed out of started. You know, that's where my dad took me when I was 12 and said, like, this is who you are, not your family, not the family of origin that he comes from, or if my mom comes from. And for us, it's not even our sports team. Like, there's not even, you know, and although we do cheer for Kentucky Wildcats, go Cats. But for us, it was that the identity of being a part of God's people was so fundamental to my family's DNA that it was much easier for me. I think that's one of the challenges, is if it's not part of who you are at your core, then it's easy for it to become another thing that you do, and it's easy for then it to become a thing that you don't do. Instead, you're not plugged in, you're not serving, you're not engaging. And I think that's where the breakdown is it's ultimately in where our identity is rooted, as hard as that is to sometimes reckon with.
For somebody, you know, my family came to the faith. I was probably 10 years old. My parents came to know Christ, and they both grew up in, my mom was going to VBS programs as a kid and loved God. And I think she was at these early stages of understanding. My dad grew up in a Catholic school in Mexico, so he had some foundational Bible stuff. But when they got married and went through some tough stuff that finally led our family, hey, we're going to start going to church. I find this unique, some similarities where I could say, oh, yeah, I remember growing up and having VBS or whatever programs. But there's also aspects of raising my kids where they have known nothing but the church and nothing but Christianity. And, you know, I do stress to my kids, I shared this recently, that I told my son, my 9-year-old, I go, if I die before you reach your 10th birthday and you're like 30 years old and 40 years old, and go, man, I wish my dad was still around to teach me stuff. I told him, I said, everything I could possibly have taught you is in the Bible. Everything I want you to know is in God's word, and I believe it with all of my heart. And I want to stress that to those kiddos, because I don't have, even my parents were great and I love them and adore them and they're my biggest champions. And I feel that even my wife and I she didn't grow up in a Christian home, are raising kids in an entirely different environment of trying to help them understand this world will tell you who you are, but Christ is the only one who will demonstrate who you are and wants you to be in difficult circumstances. So I love that your dad did that. It doesn't surprise me knowing your dad. That sounds like something he would do, and I may steal it. But it's one of those elements, I think, in our faith journey, because that's hard. I think even some pros and cons. I think a huge pro for you is being a believer who's done a lot of local ministry leadership, and now nothing's changed with your heart.
Right.
I mean, of servanthood. When I left, I have a weird journey. I was in full-time ministry for 4 years before I went to Ozark, you know?
Yeah.
And I remember going to Christ Church of Oronogo, and I wanted to volunteer. And I told my wife, I don't want the youth pastor to know I'm an ordained minister.
Yeah.
I don't want him to know that I have a background, because if he asks me to clean the toilets, I want to clean the toilets.
Yeah.
I don't want him to think I come in here and I'm like, I'm ready to teach. Like, hey, and I would tell him, Matt, what do you need? What can I do? How can I serve? And I won't forget another friend of mine from my home church. He actually was talking with our youth guy for the middle school group, and he goes, well, you know, Marco, I'm really struggling with this and this. I really need more teachers. And he's like, why don't you ask Lito? And he said, oh, you think Lito would want to teach? He's like, yeah, he's ordained. He was a youth pastor for 4 years. And he goes, Lito was a youth pastor? And he came to me and he says, why didn't you tell me? I would have had you teaching. I'm like, well, I'm here to do whatever you need. Right. If you need me to teach, I will. But I didn't want you to think I had some arrogant bone in my body. And that's what I love about you. Yeah. I have no doubt that your heart has always been that one where, you know, there was probably a couple Sundays you're like, oh, I don't have to go to church. That is a nice feeling.
It is.
For those in ministry, not having to go to church on Sunday, it's a weird feeling, because I'm the same way. I'm up at 4 or 5 a.m. because I want to go over my sermon. I want to make sure there's anything happening in the world. I'm weird. I go to Yahoo or Google News, and I actually look at what's happening the morning of a sermon to make sure there's not current events that maybe need to be prayed over. We've had shootings or a tsunami that hit. One morning, my associate pastor was going to preach. I said, hey, man, I think you should open up praying over these victims of this situation. And he was awesome, and he did. And, you know, I want to make sure that preaching is relevant at all times. Yeah. But having that moment where you're out of it and looking for that church home for you and your family, your wife, your kids, it's not just, you know, I'm big on being a part of a church. It's not just for Lito. Yeah. It's not just for TJ. It's not just for John. Whether you're in ministry or not, it's for your whole family, your community that you're trying to raise up. And I love that the kids responded knowing what they learned too from the gospel. It's great. It is.
And John, I'm sure you've even seen it in your family too, of like, I think it's easy to forget how important this is. Like, you know, for me, I still think about the fact that there is almost every Sunday, somebody's going to walk through the door of your church. You know, especially if you're a church that's healthy and active and thriving and connecting with people, and have a congregation that's inviting, you're definitely going to have people walking through the door who may have never walked through the door before, may have walked through the door for the first time in a long time, you know, may have had some really difficult experiences as a kid, and they're stepping back into the church because they don't know what else to do. And for me, like, I still think about those folks, and that is such a heavy weight. And it's so hard as an adult to go into a congregation where you may know one person, if that. To walk in the door and not know what you're doing, to not know where you're going, is so intimidating that even if you wanted to, it can be hard. And I think that one of the best things about being a part of a congregation is that you get to find out who God made you to be in a context of a community of people. And if we're not ready for that experience, I think it's easy to miss. And so it's one of the things, like, I still think about every Sunday, even though I just show up. Like, I go help do coffee, I help set up, I help tear down kids ministry. You know, I teach in the preschool room, is kind of where my primary volunteer is, because that's super fun. And if you're not volunteering at church, the preschool room is probably my favorite place to be. Those kids are just always a blast, always excited. But yeah, I think that's the challenge too, of like not forgetting how important that, you know, while the church isn't exclusively that gathering on Sunday, it really is what it means to be a part of the ecclesia, or the gathering of people.
Man, this is actually a richer conversation than I even expected. So I appreciate you giving your input on your experiences with this. Thanks for joining us for part 1 of our interview with TJ Lawson. He had a lot of great things. I really appreciate his heart when it comes to ministry, and how those who aren't in vocational ministry can be plugged in and really invest in the kingdom of God through their local church. Part 2, is going to be exclusively again on our podcast, so check that out. You can go through our Countryside Christian Church Wichita app, found in all app stores, or you can download the podcast via whatever platform you listen to your podcast, whether it be Android or Apple. Again, we appreciate you joining us. Have a great week. Happy Thanksgiving. Merry Christmas, even though we will have plenty of podcasts before Christmas comes around. But I hope you had a great holiday with your family. God bless you guys. Have a great week. See you later.